my parents are in the south, to be far away from them and to listen to them as the rockets explode and smoke billowing from nearby streets is a horrible experience I wish upon no one.
Shahar Azani, former spokesperson of Israel's consulate in New York and a veteran diplomat. Shahar, thank you so much for your time today. Now, in layman's terms, can you explain the situation between Israel and Hamas?
Yes, absolutely. If I may go back a little bit, the Hamas, even by its name, Harakat al-Muqawama al-Islamiyya, the Islamic Resistance Movement, is a fundamentalist Islamist organization which was established in 1987. Its ideology is very clear. It's not an organization that seeks reconciliation or peace. It's always had on its banner the destruction of the state of Israel and great hatred for Israel and for the Jewish people, great anti-Semitism as well that reaches not just in the region, but also globally. There has always been a bit of a tension within the Palestinian society between Hamas, that faction, and between the Fatah movement that is in control of the Palestinian Authority. I can assure you that truly Hamas detests Israel, but the conflict between these two elements is just as vile. The Palestinian Authority was in control and has always been challenged by Hamas, by the way, to this very day. We truly hoped, and I can tell you from the viewpoint of the mainstream Israeli, we truly hoped that the Palestinians will seize that opportunity and create a heaven for themselves. For we know that the ability to live peacefully side by side, we can both gain so much from that.
Shahar,
I
want to interrupt because you're making such good points here and taking me right back to how it all began. But I want to get into the nitty-gritty of what has happened in the last few days to have seen this escalated so much. Because if you're the average person who is not familiar with these huge tensions between both areas, how would you explain why in the last few days there has been the most insane, inhumane acts of killing?
Well, Hamas's ideology has always been the same. They've always been bent on targeting Israel and Jews, and whenever there is an opportunity to kill, maim, hurt, butcher, and slaughter, they'll take it. Now, from the reports that we've seen, they have prepared for this for a very long time, seeking the right opportunity, learning the lessons of the past. They also, Maddie, took advantage of Israeli benevolence. You know, even though we know Hamas's intentions, we were hoping that we could maybe somehow reason with them. Maybe if we were able to support people's lives in Gaza so that they're more tolerable, there'll be less incentive on the side of Hamas to initiate such attacks. And in the last year alone, in spite of Hamas being what it is, Israel allowed 20,000 Palestinians to cross from Gaza into Israel to work and bring back money and food and support their families. Hamas took advantage of our benevolence. It had never the intention of living peacefully side by side with Israel. It premeditated and planned this atrocious, unheard of, unprovoked, that came as a huge surprise. I mean, listen, we as Israelis, we know their hatred to us. We know the risks. But Maddie, to see innocent women, elderly people, Holocaust survivors, butchered, you know, they just pull out the corpses of Itai and Hadar Bardichevsky, two 30-year-old parents who fought bravely until they were murdered at their home by these Hamas terrorists, hiding their two twin 10-month-old babies who were left alone for 10 hours until rescue operation was able to get to them. These are images that are reminiscent to Israelis of nothing short than the Holocaust, nothing short than Nazism. Taking a 7-year-old Israeli boy and parading him in Gaza as being probed with sticks and curses as dirty Jew on the streets of Gaza by Hamas. Who behaves like this? These are not enemies of Israel, Maddie. These are enemies of humanity.
Shahar, how do you see this ending if we're seeing the most disgusting, acts of terrorism and it doesn't look like it's slowing down any soon? How do you see this end? How do we find peace?
So when we withdrew from Gaza, the Palestinian Authority took over. In a matter of a little over a year, Hamas took over from the Palestinian Authority by force. It perpetrated a military coup, killing Palestinian members of Fatah, dragging their corpses in the street with similar cruelty. And ever since, it has the responsibility for the safety and security of Gazans in its hands. It was perceived to be the sovereign, the power that controls the Gaza Strip. In the course of the time in which Hamas controlled the Gaza Strip, it continued to focus not on making lives better for ordinary Gazans, not on building hospitals, but rather using every resource they had, whether it's from their own acts of terror, whether it's from Iran or elsewhere, to build military infrastructure and to use ordinary Gazans as human shields. In the course of the entire armed Second Intifada against Israel with suicide attacks, we lost around 1,000 people in a matter of a few years. On Saturday, we lost close to 1,000 people in one day. That means that what was will be no more. And the situation on the ground is going to have to change fundamentally.
Well, Shahar, you say that Israelis want, they want peace, they want freedom, they want to go about their lives and live freely normally. But what does Palestine want?
Well, I feel for Palestinians. Remember, the Oslo Accords was not pushed by the US or others, but by Israel initiating negotiations with the Palestinians. We withdrew from Gaza not because anybody pushed us to do so, because we wanted to see what that might look like if we try to achieve peaceful neighbor relations with the Palestinians. The problem is there is a limit to your responsibility. Our first priority as Israel is to defend our civilians. When they take an 85-year-old woman and drag her back to Gaza. I mean, think about this, Maddie. We got out of Gaza. They're dragging us back. They're holding dozens of hostages there, including women and children. What kind of reality is that for the ordinary Israeli to contend with? So I do feel for Palestinians, and I hope that Palestinians can be saved, and maybe the world can do more, maybe the Arab world can do more, but Hamas has to be ousted. For as long as Hamas is there, Palestinians are not safe and Israelis are not safe. And unfortunately, we have paid a dear price with what Hamas has done, and Palestinians will pay a price until Hamas is ousted. The blood of Palestinian children and civilians who are uninvolved is on Hamas's hands. There is no other choice for Israel but to defend itself. No country, no town, no village, no city will allow themselves to be butchered the way we have been butchered by these, I don't even want to say animals because animals are precious, by these monstrosities of individuals who don't deserve to be called humans.
Well, Shahar, on that note, you're based in New York and there were pro-Palestinians chanting in the streets, marching for Palestine. How do you feel when you read these headlines, when you see these photos and these videos and you have innocent Jewish people dying, there's kidnapping, there's rape, there's inhumanity, and it's all documented? How hard is it for you to look outside your doorstep and see pro-Palestinians?
They were right here, Maddie, in Times Square. I'm disgusted and reviled. These are, again, not enemies of Israel who are holding swastikas in the heart of Times Square, who are relishing in the butchering of innocent people, in the rape of young girls in front of their parents, in the execution of a young daughter in front of her siblings. Who behaves in such a way? And these are, again, enemies of humanity and of civilization. We've heard of, unfortunately, at least 9 Americans who were butchered by Hamas terrorists, others who are maybe captured and being held hostage by Hamas, and other nationalities of victims of this atrocious, unbelievable, unheard of bestiality of an attack. And at the same time, when you see people marching down the street, supporting what? They're telling us what? That they support the butchering of innocent? This is a battle that touches the foundation of who we are as human beings and the foundations of our society, which is, I believe, the result of the reason for the incredible support that we have been seeing from many places around the world. I was touched to see just a few minutes ago an incredible video coming to us from the Ukraine, from Ukrainian soldiers fighting for their lives. We're seeing such messages of support from all over, because there is no decent human being who can stand by justice and humanity that will march for what? I mean, to be honest, when you listen to me, Maddie, my interests are more aligned with those of ordinary Palestinians than those marching down the street. For what Hamas has brought upon Palestinians in Gaza is nothing but death and destruction for years now.
Well, Shahar, I want to get into foreign involvement. How involved do you think the United States will get as a big ally of Israel, and what help do you think they should be providing?
Well, first of all, Israel and Israelis, ordinary Israelis, truly appreciate the United States friendship. You can imagine, Maddie, there has been differences between the Netanyahu government and the Israeli government with the U.S. administration. There has been tension, of course, between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Biden, revolving around the composition of Israel's current coalition and several internal policies. But all that is gone out the window because the Americans understand that the attack that was perpetrated against Israel is an attack on the US. And I don't just mean on the humanity level, on killing Americans and beyond, because we've seen that in the past. I'm talking about the Iranian guidance, as it was published yesterday in the Wall Street Journal, to perpetrate the attack and sabotage the potential peace between Israel and Saudi Arabia, one of the Biden administration's major goals and one of US's strategic interests in the region. Iran knows why it pulled the trigger and why it's funding money for Hamas to do so. The United States has already declared that it's sending forces to the region, USS Gerald Ford, military equipment, financial support, because they know that just like Iran states, the big Satan and the small Satan, the big Satan is the United States of America, is a symbol for Western values and Western civilization. The small Satan in their eyes is the state of Israel, which is a beacon of that light in what is too often a very dark region.
Well, Shahar, it's so easy to say, well, Western countries are going to give support, they're going to give foreign, humanitarian, military aid to countries that are struggling. But it is hard when you have constituents that want to keep their own defence, their own military, their own money on home soil. So what do you think it will say if Biden has said the US defence stockpile is depleting because of how much the country has sent to Ukraine?
Well, the truth is, Maddie, that when it comes to the state of Israel, supporting Israel is supporting the security and the strategic interests of the United States of America. These terrorist groups, Hamas, which is just like ISIS and others, who, by the way, are eager to join the battles against the Jews, these people have no kind intentions vis-a-vis the West or the United States of America. Even the military aid that's provided by the United States to Israel is immediately funneled back into the industry in the United States to procure that military equipment that's needed for Israel's defense. So in that sense, the standing side by side of Israel and the United States of America and others is a direct benefit for all people around the world, including citizens of the United States. Israeli technology has saved numerous lives in Iraq and elsewhere using whether they encountered IEDs or any other installments perpetrated by the Iranian Revolutionary Guards against the US. We remember the 1982 attacks against the Marine barracks in Lebanon, which killed 242 Marines. So our enemy is the US's enemy.
Well, critics of the Biden administration have said that this whole attack is a result of Joe Biden's closeness to Iran. What do you make of a statement like that?
Well, we are at a different point at the moment because of the situation that was forced upon us, never seen before, unheard of, like I said before, even 1948 and Holocaust visuals. But at the same time, there was a lot of criticism over the funneling of those $6 billion to Iran, because we know what they're doing with that money. I have to tell you, Maddie, from a personal viewpoint, from my experience in the 90s in Israel, Islamic Jihad was paid by Iran, by the head, counting the number of Israeli corpses as a result of their suicide bombings. This is how gruesome a regime that is. I don't know if you saw some of the images that came out of Iran yesterday showing ordinary Iranians booing the regime's attempt to stand by Hamas, because we stand by the people of Iran. We understand that the same nefarious nature of the regime that is spawning so much death and destruction in the Middle East and the wider Middle Eastern region is the same regime that does terrible things to its own people. So in that sense, even though the United States has done things that were heavily criticized in Israel, I believe that the current situation has brought with it a different understanding of the forces that be in our region. And I hope that even though Israel paid a most heaviest of prices, we will see a different future for Israelis and for the people in the region, a future that will not only see the disappearance and the eradication of Hamas's terrible influence in the region, but also one that will move forward with peace between Israel, Saudi Arabia, and other countries in the region. We will always hold on to that hope, Maddie, always.
Do you think that, I want to get back to that, the notion that the Biden administration unfroze that $6 billion. They did that in exchange for the release of some prisoners. But how do you think this still looks on the surface to have billions of dollars sent back to the country, which has backed Iranian terrorists, which are carrying out these killings? I mean, I don't know if you could, if...
It's terrible. It's terrible, and American officials have claimed as a result, when hearing such accusations, that the money is still not in Iranian hands. It's still in Doha. I don't know whether that's the case, but the truth is that it's terrible. There is no way to beautify this horrible concept. This is an evil regime to the core, vis-a-vis its own people in the world. And there needs to be a very clear-cut position, not just when it comes to the nuclear issue. You know, the nuclear issue is only one issue that's on the table. I'm talking about the human rights violations in Iran itself. And there is a huge movement within Israel of people who are in touch with ordinary Iranians who try to funnel their pain and share it with the outside world in the hope of galvanizing some sort of action to save the people of Iran. But there is nothing good that can be said about giving money to a nefarious regime like the Ayatollah regime in Tehran.
If we compare it to Ukraine and how there were sanctions placed and it affected the economy, I do wonder if these tensions between the two nations will mirror a similar financial reaction.
If we are able as an international community to bring back those sanctions onto the Iranian regime, I mean, you're mentioning the Ukraine. One of the commonalities that we've seen is the usage of Iranian drones against ordinary Ukrainian civilians who've been butchered en masse in Kiev and elsewhere using Iranian technology. They were very open about testing their equipment on ordinary Ukrainians, and there are whispers that that very same equipment has also been used in Israel in Hamas's attack against Israeli civilians. So there is no doubt that whatever happens, it's in the interest of the world and of humanity to curb the Iranian regime, the Tehran regime, because this is not a regime that seeks peace or reconciliation or stability in any way, shape, and form. And what Hamas, its proxy, did in Gaza is the ultimate proof. For if they had done nothing, ordinary Gazans would have peace and stability. And it's only as a result of their ferocious animosity against people, against Israel, against the elderly, against the children, that we're seeing such devastation on both sides, by the way, of the border.
Shahar, do you think that this will escalate, the conflict will escalate into other Arab countries? And if it does, how do you think the US and other Western allies should respond to that?
We don't expect it to escalate beyond, and we're hoping that we'll be able to do so, because we know what we're hearing from our friends in those countries. And I can assure you, these are not whispers of love and passion for the leadership of Hamas. They know very well who we're dealing with.
Well, Shahar, I want to just finally ask you about how your kind of interaction you've had with anyone that you know on the ground in Israel, or anyone that you know who has been taken by Hamas. And
we are devastated, Maddie. I'm on the phone continuously. My parents are in the south, not too close to the border, but close enough. The sirens wail. To be far away from them and to listen to them as the rockets explode and smoke billowing from nearby streets is a horrible experience I wish upon no one. Speaking with people in Israel, people are in shock and disbelief. Every minute we hear of more and more cruelty of Hamas terrorists against innocent Israelis. I'm talking about, the rave. Something that really touched me was the YouTube video that came out with Bono speaking in memory of the fallen stars of David. It was a really touching moment for those kids who came to enjoy the forest and the thoughts of peace and music and love. And 260 of them, Maddie, 260 of them were butchered, including the rape of many of the girls, and then undressing them and parading their corpses on the streets of Gaza. These are sights that are unbearable for ordinary Israelis. This is a time when we are in great shock and disbelief. And one of the metaphors I use is we have an incredibly tearful eye, but one which is filled with a fire of strength and unity. You've never seen such unity in Israel. The last few months in Israel have been marred with political conflict internally and a lot of disagreement internally, all of this evaporated completely. Israelis are completely part of this effort for unity and strength, because we know that for us it's the fight for Jewish survival and a direct continuation of the fights against evil such as Nazism, and nothing will stand in our way to achieve victory simply because we have no other choice. And Hamas's miscalculation, thinking that we are weak and we won't be able to withstand its attack, will be discovered to be a strategic mistake that they made in their struggle against Israel.
Shahar Azani, thank you so much for your time and your expertise on everything that's going on in Israel, and I wish you all the luck.
Thank you for having me, Maddie.